Hello, and welcome to this week's conversation on the illicit feminine. I am so excited about today's conversation. I am having a good friend of mine who we are going to call Jane for sake of anonymity, talking about the conversation around open marriage. It is a subject that I was first introduced to like more in depth in my conscious uncoupling and calling in the one training under Catherine Woodward Thomas. And it was a really fascinating concept to me. It wasn't something that I knew a lot about. And then later on, a few years later, I was introduced to this amazing, incredible woman who was participating in this concept of open marriage, who was really just forthcoming and transparent about it. And I knew when I decided that I was going to look at September being the month of relationships, that I wanted to include this conversation. I am launching a new journey for women, couples that are interested in really figuring out what they want within their marriage. It's around, am I wanting to stay in my marriage? Am I wanting to create something new in my marriage? Or am I really wanting to complete that chapter in my life and move on to something different? But one of the things that's really important to me to delve deeper into is that there's not just one way to do marriage, that there are very many avenues if your marriage isn't working that people can look into. And I think these are conversations that are really important to have, especially outside the communities that practice open marriage or polyamory, because I don't know that there is so much information. I think there's a lot of ignorance, and that's not a bad thing about this. I don't mean that like in a derogatory way, but about this subject, there's a lot of misconceptions. And so I am thrilled to have Jane on today to help us unveil more of what open marriage is about, both from a collective point of view as well as her point of view. So, Jane, welcome.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I agree with you. There is a lot of misconception around it. So I was really excited when you asked me to share because I think it is such an important conversation for people to be exposed to.
100%. 100%. We had a little mishap. We were recording and well, we weren't recording. We were talking and not recording. So we started over. But one of the things you said, Jane, was that people don't know what they don't know, right? And I think when we don't know something, we just in our human minds can jump to judgments or fear around it, right? And I think that really exploring what open marriage is and the different spectrum is something I'm so excited about today. So I would love you to share with us the concept of open marriage, like I guess kind of what I said before, collectively as well as personally to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, truly, it's such a broad way of doing relationship. There's so many different versions of it, and it is as unique as the two or more people involved in it, and it really can be whatever you want to make of it. So for us, for our current the term we use, open marriage, is looks like that we can go see couples together, we can date individually, separately with another partner, and really that's kind of our version of what our open marriage looks like right now.
Okay. So you had said this, and this is the question I was going to ask before I realized I wasn't recording. You said that people can call it different things. What are some of the other terms that open marriage is called?
I mean, you'll hear people say like if you're married, you're swingers or you're like you use the term polyamorous. People have like a triad or which is like, you have a couple that has a relationship with another person that's like truly a third piece of that relationship dynamic. Every time I interact with new people. Oh, I know some people use the term lifestyle, like you're in the lifestyle. When I interact with people that are in the lifestyle, I am always learning like new things and new terms and new phrases and new ways that people talk about their dynamic.
So interesting. Okay, so I know that when I first learned that this was a lifestyle that you and your husband practiced, I was like so fascinated. So I'm going to kind of take the seat of, and you've been so wonderful in being open and transparent about this subject because it actually, while it isn't something that is in like my world personally, like I love when people do things differently to form what works for them. It's just something that I think is so amazing. So walk us through, like you obviously, well, I know this about you. You and your husband did not start out in an open marriage. That wasn't like how your relationship began, correct?
No. Yeah, I did not know.
Okay, so walk us through like, just kind of the primary things like you're in a closed marriage.
Hmm.
Is that an appropriate term?
Yeah, yep.
Okay. And then
Or
like,
monogamous.
okay,
There a lot of people will use also the term like monogamous or like non-monogamous, ethical non-monogamous, that kind of thing.
okay. Very cool. And those are terms that the therapist, she was actually a therapist for polyamorous couples. She's got like this amazing book out and it goes through contracts and different things. So it's really laid out clear for each person in the relationship of what the boundaries are. Those are terms that she had introduced us to. Thank you for bringing those up. Walk us through. You're not in an open marriage. How does that conversation come up? What's happening in this situation?
Yeah. My husband and I were in a monogamous marriage for like 12, almost 12 years of that. So we married young and we have three children. At that time, it wasn't like things were bad in our marriage. It was more kind of like not, there was room for growth for sure. And we were learning a lot about each other and ourselves. I've always kind of been a little bit of a non-traditional like way of doing things in the world. When he actually brought it up to me, he met someone at a work conference, a woman who was from Australia who lived the lifestyle with her husband, and they spent a couple days just like really digging into what that means and what that looks like. When he came home from that trip, he actually first introduced me to her as just like, hey, I think that you and this person would get along because she was a lot like me. She was sort of an entrepreneur doing her own thing and had a lot of the similar just views on life as me outside of that piece of it. So her and I became friendly. And then once her and I were friendly and she kind of brought it up to me about it, it opened up the conversation for him to say, like, so I heard, that you learned about their dynamic. What do you think about that? When I had learned about this other woman's marriage dynamic, I was really interested and curious and just like open to it. He was kind of like, would you ever consider doing something like that? And I was like, huh. I didn't ever think about it before because it wasn't even a topic. It wasn't even like something outside of cliche movies and things like that that I even had in my world. So when he brought it up to me, being that I happen to be somebody who is a little bit more just like open-minded about non-traditional living in general, not just around sexuality, I was like, all right, what would it look like? How would we do that? And really, the way we started was to bring one other person into our sexual dynamic to see how that would go first, which I think is the way a lot of people start, is they bring in another guy or another girl into the bedroom and kind of experiment there.
So I want to definitely delve into that a little bit more, but I want to rewind for a second, right? Because I this is I do think this is a really fascinating part of human nature. So I had done a sex class, a sexual training called Pleasure Boot Camp with Mama Gina, and you get split off into groups. I got split off into a small group with two women. One was polyamorous, so she was part of a foursome that they all were together. And then another woman who was she was with different people, but it wasn't that they were all together. Okay. Does that make sense? So
Mhm.
one-on-one relationships outside her marriage. And it fascinated me. There was no jealousy. So my first instinct is like when I hear about stuff like that, to have some sort of jealousy. Now, openly admitting, right, that I definitely in the past was more of an insecure person. So I do think that there is this admiration that I have and respect of, is it just that people who choose this lifestyle have such an air of confidence and security, like they don't get jealous that there is another person that their spouse or partner finds attractive. I'm not exposed to a lot of people in this world, but the ones that are don't seem to have this jealousy factor.
I mean, I think it's not a blanket across the board that people don't have jealousy. There's
Of
definitely,
course. Of
you will
course.
see jealousy within the lifestyle, just like anything anywhere else. I will say that people who are choosing this, generally for it to work, do have to be really secure with not only themselves, but with their relationship. They have to feel really safe in their relationship to be able to be comfortable with their partner being with someone else. And again, not everyone is capable of experiencing what they call compersion, which is like the pleasure of seeing your partner having pleasure or like knowing that your partner is having pleasure. To me, it's like a level of your own personal ability to feel that. Like you love your partner so much that them having joy, no matter how they're kind of getting it, is joyful for you. And I think that that's just a big piece of what plays into what works when you choose this kind of lifestyle.
Absolutely. There is a higher evolved consciousness amongst people who are participating in this lifestyle. And I get that it's not a blanket. It's people are human, right? Like there's still the human emotions that come into it. But there does seem on a level, and again, there does appear to be a more evolved consciousness in ways. Just when you said, like, to be able to be pleasured and find pleasure in the fact that you love somebody so much that them having pleasure is like pleasurable, like, right?
Mm.
Like that. So let's combine the compersion factor. Can I ask, did you bring a male or female into
We
your?
started, and I think that this was again like his way of easing me into the idea. We started with another man in the bedroom with us. Everyone's desires are different. So for my husband, he was definitely in just even like fantasy talk before we opened the marriage of was it was a turn on to him to see me with and like to be involved with me and another man. So we had talked about that in fantasy. So he knew, it wasn't out of left field for him to say like, hey, what if we start here?
And how was that like when he says that to you? Was that like exciting? Like was that a turn on to you? Or like, yeah, that's where I want to start?
Yeah, I think I was in a really good place and fit with myself at that time where like I had gotten my body back after my third baby and I was starting to feel like kind of, sexy again. And it was definitely exciting to me to think about like, ooh, you don't really get to sh show your body in that way to outside of your spouse. So it was kind of like, huh, that was kind of exciting to me. So yeah, I was open to it when we first talked about it.
Before we move on, I know that this can go so many different ways, and you've shared with me some other people's, not who they are, but just the other ways that this can go. With this particular experience, was your husband involved? Was it with you and the other man? Was this
Hmm.
something where you've shared the term with it, and I don't remember what it was, but was this more of
Yeah.
something where he watched?
Yeah. So that's called usually like cuckolding. So it's like if your husband wants to just watch you with
Okay.
another person. And no, that is not our dynamic personally. So if we are with another person, it's because he wants to be involved in it. So he was involved in the interactions when we first did that.
Okay. So then for you personally, right, as a woman, like after that experience, what was your experience like after that first experience? Like what's going through your
Yeah.
mind?
Oh
What's
my
going
gosh, it was so many things. I mean, if we're talking about purely just like fun and like sensuality, for sure, I enjoyed it. there it's being to me the enjoyment was like being center of attention, being like really just adored and doted on and like it just felt so beautiful to be like this worshipped kind of figure in the bedroom. And it brought up already, like that, even the very first time, a lot of stuff with us, with our relationship and some insecurity for sure. My husband was like, what the heck when we first started, because it was kind of like, oh my God, what am I doing? I think it opened honestly up sort of like a portal for us in our relationship to be really, really open and transparent with each other about likes, dislikes, insecurities, like what, really the details of what we each enjoy because it was like, okay, now we've cracked this, wide open.
Yeah.
So if anything, even just after that first experience, it kind of just opened our minds to talking with each other in a lot more detail about the good, the bad, the things we enjoy, we don't enjoy. And it was very much still like a shared experience. So that was kind of the launching point off into the world of lots of different things that we tried from there.
I have to say that the other thing that I have respect for, and I do like how you really said in response to one of my comments, it's not a blanket, right? But I guess I'll just say this within you. I really have a lot of respect for the openness and the honesty. And it's actually not just with you. Like, I mean, I have like just different people, or when you're reading about these different things, there is a like this does work best when people are so honest and so transparent. And I do think that that is different than the way some other marriages work, right? Like, I think some traditional marriages can not be that honest with each other because they don't necessarily have to be, right? And I'm not
Mm,
talking about people blatantly outright lying. I'm just talking about people not talking about their feelings or
yeah,
not talking about their desires or not talking about like their turn-ons and their fantasies, right? And the fact
yeah,
that
totally.
you guys are so deeply doing that, I have such respect for. I
I
really
mean,
do.
we weren't always like that. This was definitely
Right.
something that came out of this. Before, like I said, when we were in our monogamous era of marriage for so many years, we like laugh now at how we didn't know each other. Like we knew each other for so long, and yet we knew nothing about each other sexually in that way. Probably like a 5 out of 10 sex life at that time while we were monogamous, because it was more just like, it was traditional. It's kind of just going through the motions. It just was like a topic that felt kind of taboo, honestly, to talk about, especially when you're talking about something that's outside of what's quote unquote normal in bed, like talking about more of your kinks or things that are maybe a little bit outside of what is, we in the lifestyle we call it vanilla, like outside of the vanilla marriage sex arena. It just like wasn't something we talked about or that felt like safe or okay to talk about. I was very hesitant to talk about any kind of like kink that I thought would be perceived as like slutty or dirty or any of these words that we self-identify when we talk about our sensuality outside of what is considered just like a traditional way of doing it.
Absolutely. Okay. So then what are some of the kinks that you feel more comfortable talking about now?
Well, something that, in the conversation about me first of all, desiring being with another two guys at one time, that was like a huge, if a lot of people, if you said that to them, they would be like jaw on the floor. But that also opened up the conversation about having anal sex, like
Mhm.
that, wanting double penetration, like some of these topics that you just like, I would have never have felt comfortable talking about with him or I mean, anyone, but even him, like even my most, trusted, closest person sexually in my life, I didn't even feel comfortable talking about that with him before we went down this path. So it really just opened up that I felt safe sharing anything that came to mind of like, ooh, that's kind of hot. I want to try that. It opened my mind and my like that feeling of safety to share that.
Absolutely. Okay. So then I want to make sure like I got in all the really good questions. Do you think that because you shared, and if you don't mind sharing, like how you came to be a part, because you have a community, correct?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So I'd love to hear like how you became like a part of that community, like how that was brought about. But then the other piece, do you think having like-minded, even though I get everybody has their different things, right? But people have kind of the like-mindedness that this is something that they're interested in and doing, right? Do you think that helped you also feel more secure in talking to your partner about it, as well as like letting that desire like within you, like that fantasy, that kink, whatever it may be? Do you think having a community of like-minded people that was able to give you more confidence in listening to yourself and trusting yourself and fulfilling that desire?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the community, so finding the community, with the internet, there's obviously lots of ways to find community for people who are doing things that's outside of the traditional way of doing it. There's like different apps and websites and party organizers, people who do things like that. So we've really kind of explored all of those different avenues and found what we feel like are kind of our community of people. And we're always meeting new people. Like we just recently met a couple that moved to our area not that long ago. And now, they've become like our really close friends over the last couple weeks. So you're constantly like meeting new people too, and your community constantly is evolving. I feel so close with these people because I feel like I can share all of me. You can share stories, you can share things that are exciting to you. And we don't just talk about sex. We talk about everything. We talk about life. We talk about family. We talk about our work. Like a lot of people in the lifestyle, just like I explained earlier about myself, are people who believe in a non-traditional way of doing life. Like they're not trying to keep up with the status quo. They're not feeling like I have to live by other people's judgment. I can blaze my own path. So it is empowering to be around people who are also living that way. And you learn things about, like I said earlier, too, you don't know what you don't know. So when you're with different people who, some people have been doing this for 20 years or whatever, they're gonna expose you to things and talk about things, and you'll be like, oh wow, like we never thought about that or we never tried that. And then all of a sudden it becomes a conversation that you have with your partner, like, oh, did you hear about so and so? And like, would you want to try that? Or even something maybe that they experience with another person being like, wow, we tried this and it was like really fun. You want to try that together? Like, so we bring it back around to the marriage too, a lot of times.
Which is so cool because it really just then, it sounds like in your experience, helps you guys to grow closer and even more like deeper knowledge of who each other is as you're evolving, like in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so then I would love to hear, because how long would you say you guys have been participating in the lifestyle?
We're only like a little over 3 years. That's so short to be considered someone with a lot of experience. I will say though that him and I really dove in headfirst and did all the things like really within the first year of doing this. We went through all the phases that some people, even after 10 or 15 years of doing this, don't try or don't go down those paths.
Phases.
I mean, like, so I feel like a lot of people bring in a third, like bring in a
Okay.
woman or bring in a man, and then there's going with another couple, like the two of you going with another couple, like in the same room. And then some people will say, like, okay, well, now I'm comfortable with being with another couple and being in separate rooms, but in the same house, maybe. Or then, I think one of the evolutions that is less common is the dating separately. So I think
Mm.
once you kind of are feeling really comfortable and confident with that like compersion piece, then you can start opening it to dating separately. Of course, there's people who start with, hey, the woman met another man and wants to date him separately and they don't want to get divorced. They want to stay together. She still loves her husband, but also loves this other man. And that, that could be the way they start. It's just this is what I see kind of as like a common evolution in the lifestyle is the one that I talked about at first.
Absolutely. Okay, so what phase after 3 years and like these different trials and seeing what works, like what phase are you guys in now?
Well, I mean, we actually went through a time that was really difficult. I had met a guy and, my husband and I had never really talked about the feelings aspect of being in an open marriage. We always talked about the sexual piece of it, but we didn't really talk about what happens when you start to have feelings like love for another person. And that is an important conversation to have because, especially for women, the emotional connection to your sexuality is really a lot of times is like one and the same. Our enjoyment is so rooted in our connection to the other human being that we are with.
Absolutely.
So when that happened and that came up for me, that really brought up a lot of feelings with my husband, and he struggled a lot with my capability or capacity to love someone else and still feel like I loved him the same. For a time, that looked like us taking a break and just refocusing on each other and our marriage. We even started couples counseling and did some of that stuff, which has been really beautiful. We kind of take it for like, how are we checking in with each other? Like, how are you with things and what do we need? Because at the end of the day, for me, my relationship with my husband right now in the phase of life that I'm in is the most important thing. I really care about keeping my family together. I really love my husband, so I want to make sure that when I'm whatever we're doing, it's in alignment with the core relationship, which is the two of us.
Absolutely. What do you think has really served you from being in this lifestyle, both personally and in your relationship?
Wow. I mean, I think for me personally, this was like the cracking open of my true self. I really feel that that is an accurate statement. I think trying to fit into the traditional wife mother role was really soul crushing for me. I think, trying to be like everyone else and it really just it didn't fit me and my personality, and I tried really hard to fit into that box for a really long time. So this was like the opening up of my true self and my highest self because I'm really focused on like what brings me joy and taking care of my body and knowing like again I think we can get lost in a marriage and motherhood and kind of be like, well, this is just how it is now, and let your body go or stop caring because you're like, well, it's my husband, he's like not going to leave me if I gain 50 pounds or whatever it is. We can get into this way. And I did get into that phase of life, but I think really caring about my body and caring about my physical self, like my beauty, it took it to the next level of importance for me, which again, some people say, oh, that's superficial. But for me, it really like is it's a part of who I am. I feel amazing when I look amazing. And I think being in the lifestyle and knowing, not just my husband's going to get to enjoy this body and this look and that fun outfit and that sexy thing. Like, I think that that really is a part of it for me is knowing that like, yes, he's going to get to enjoy it, but also I'm going to have other people that are going to see and enjoy it. And it just became really like something that lit me up. Sorry, I lost the other question that you asked. That was me personally. Oh, and in my relationship. I mean, we are so much closer as a couple. Like, I feel like he and I have dug deep into ourselves and into each other's like soul because of this. Because all of the stuff that comes up, like you were saying before, the jealousy, the insecurities, the healing, the wounds that you have from even things that came up through this were revealing wounds for us in our past relationships, in our childhood, in stories we have about what is good, what is bad, how we believe our lives, like what's important to us in our lives, and not just because it's what people say should be important. I think that that was all of those things really came up because of being in this lifestyle.
And I think one of the things I love, just even I'll say about you and the way you're choosing to do your relationship, but the piece that came from the lifestyle, right, is that it really does force you to go below the surface. Like it really forces you to have the conversations about childhood and patterns and like if there's I'm not saying this for you guys, I'm just saying in general, like any abuse in there, any things like addictions, any things like you have the conversations, right? Because that's the only way that this is really gonna for you guys have intentionally created something that's really open and honest so that it does succeed,
Yeah.
in whatever way you choose for that to look. Working with couples, especially couples when they're deciding to complete, that isn't there. That level of communication, that level of
Hmm.
honesty, that level of depth, like it's not necessarily there because it was so on the surface and like they did live the well I should look marriage should look like this I should
Hmm.
look and I don't necessarily mean physically like
Yeah.
I should be this I should
Hmm.
and it isn't listening to those deeper desires and so really just want to like I don't know I think it's really cool that you guys do have those conversations on the other end, what would you say, if anything, has been the biggest challenges? And again, I know you've shared some, but like kind of to cap it, what would you say have been the biggest challenges about deciding to do this lifestyle?
I think there's still definitely pieces of it that part of the struggle is, and as you can see, the anonymity of being even on this
Sure.
podcast is that it's not socially acceptable, widely socially acceptable. So, we do have to kind of keep this as a secret part, or not totally secret, because obviously I've shared my story with people who I'm close with and trust. But you do feel like you're keeping sort of this double secret life sometimes, and that it's not socially acceptable because people don't understand it and may have a lot of judgment around it. So I think that's difficult. And then I think that we still struggle sometimes. My husband in particular for sure struggles with his own upbringing, as he's actually was brought up Catholic. So I think he has some, and he's a very faith-based person. So I think he still does struggle sometimes with the faith aspect of this and sort of how it is kind of in direct contrast to what he was brought up believing about marriage and the sanctity of marriage. So, that's a conversation we have here and there when he's questioning that piece of this.
So going on that, really, and I don't want to get too much into your husband just because it's his story, right?
Hmm.
With with like the faith or with his family, just I ask
Yeah.
because Catholicism, whether I'm choosing it or not, is a very big part of my life. Just as my kids are my daughter's in Catholic school and my kids were baptized Catholic. My husband comes, we call it culturally Catholic, but like just given his family. So for your husband does that like how does he deal with the questions around that and again not trying to get too personal because that's his story but can you generalize that like when that comes
Yeah. I mean, I think we always talk about faith and God like in a certain way in our family, and it is very different than the way he was brought up to think about God. I think his faith has evolved over his adulthood and being married to me and us really like sitting in the question of like what role does God and like organized religion play in life? And, at the end of the day, we always ask the question, like, who is your God? And if your God is a loving God, would your loving God want you to be living in a way that's not authentic to who you are, or if, your God put a desire on your heart to do something in your life? And again, as long as you're not hurting anyone else, if the desire is there, then to me, it's because it's there for a reason. And if it's authentically a part of who you are, what brings you joy or what brings your marriage closer, it's like, okay, would a loving God be punishing about this or not want you to live in your full authenticity? So, we really sit with that question a lot. There's always questions about what is authentic desire and what is Because sex, just like anything, can be addictive. The lust can be addictive, the attention can be addictive. So we also really do sit with that a lot too, of like, okay, where is this nourishing and nurturing in our marriage and our love life and our sex life, and where does it become dysfunctional? So we really much more intentional even now after a few years than we were in the beginning about intentionally choosing certain things and not choosing certain things, knowing ourselves really well at this point.
Which is incredible. And I think the consciousness level that you two are both intentionally creating is so important and why this is continuing to work for you. And I get it, right? Like your relationship is like any other relationship. It's going to have its challenges and it's going to have its peaks and it's going to have its growth, right? So regardless of whether you're in a closed relationship or an open relationship or anything, but the fact that you two continue to create consciously with each other this beautiful container of talking and communication and exploration. Like I just, it's very admirable. Okay, so as we're coming to a close, I do have the questions of family. How, for you personally, and maybe just a couple other examples, when you have kids, especially like kids that are more aware, right? Like, so like, I don't know, maybe 10 or over, like, you know what I mean? Like they're not little, right? They're not going to bed at 8 o'clock and then things are different. Like, how does that play into the lifestyle?
Yeah, I mean, we have three kids. We have a almost 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter and a 7-year-old boy. So that is very
They're
much,
aware.
yeah, that's very much the world we live in right now. And, our conscious choice is to keep this piece of our marriage not expose our children to that piece of what we do. Will that change at some point in our lives? Maybe. For right now, we've just decided that this is something that we want to keep between the two of us. And that's kind of one of those challenges is we do need to be a little bit secretive about things, and we're pretty protective over our family in terms of like, we don't expose our family to people that we are seeing, like we don't have anybody over to our house, stuff like that. I think it is harder when you have older kids that are kind of like, huh, where are you going? Or who are you going out with? And part of it is honestly, though, that, it would be, we're going out with friends just like any other friends. They just happen to be friends that are, lifestyle friends. So a lot of times it's just, hey, we're going out with another couple that we know, which is not, which is true. So yeah.
I am so grateful for you like letting us get a glimpse into the lifestyle, into your personal perspective from it. So as we are closing, what do you want people to know that they may not know, that there may be misconceptions on, or that they just like really don't know much about an open marriage lifestyle?
I think it's the biggest thing that I would invite people to consider is just not making a judgment about what it means to be in an open marriage. I think, something that I thought about before I popped on here today and just part of sharing this story and being on this podcast with you, I think there are so many marriages, and I have really seen a lot, seeing that I am allowed to date men. A lot of times I'll be exposed to men who are dating without their wife. I don't see men like that, but they will pop into my sphere because, they're looking for something outside of their marriage without their wife knowing. And I think a big piece that I just am hyper aware of is that there are so many, it is a human desire, a human nature to have desire, to have sexual desire for the opposite sex or the same sex, or to have needs that are not in the box of traditional societal norms. I think what happens is because people try so hard to fit into these boxes, we end up trying to bury a piece of ourselves that's really authentic to us, which causes a lot of harm in a relationship when you're constantly suppressing a desire or a need, whether that's sexual or whatever, in your marriage. And then it leads to infidelity. It leads to doing things that are breaking of that trust and breaking down the relationship instead of really adding to it. So, the big thing that I thought about the importance of this is just saying that it's okay to have the desires that you have. And that I think if more people were more open to even just talking about it and talking about their desires and not having shame around what they actually want sexually, a lot of marriages would be saved and would be a lot happier if people could just, be open about what they want and consider what a different dynamic would look like, even if it's outside of what is the societal norm for a marriage.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree so much because it's happening. I mean, it's happening,
Yeah,
like you said,
exactly.
whether it's behind
Mm,
doors and in infidelity or whether it is open. So it's not having the conversation isn't preventing anything. You know what I mean?
exactly.
It's been happening for centuries. I think it's an important conversation. So for people who are just maybe looking, and it's not that you're promoting anything as far as like a particular avenue of information, but where would you suggest that somebody could even look at if they want to know more about this type of lifestyle?
I mean, there's a lot of books I can think of off the top of my head. I mean, it's about what version of this you're thinking about exploring, and it's really about the situation in your marriage at the moment. I will say that if your marriage is hurting, this is not going to save a marriage that's hurting. Really, it's
Sure.
about, yeah, it's like healing yourself and healing the relationship. It could look like opening eventually, but I will say that what I've seen to be true is like you really need to have a strong marriage to be able to withstand what will come up for each of you throughout this. And again, depending on the version of this you're looking at exploring, there's lots of different resources, whether that's like polyamory, there's books on polyamory, or if you're just looking to bring another person into your marriage and what that would look like. I don't want to share any specific resource because I feel like there's so much out there and it's really going to pertain to your specific situation. But I would do a little research and dig into kind of like, this is the dynamic we're thinking about exploring and then look at kind of what's available for that particular dynamic. So whether that is polyamory or going into the lifestyle as a couple and seeing other couples, whatever the dynamic you're thinking about exploring is, I would research that particular dynamic and dive into the resources that are brought from that.
Awesome. Awesome guidance. Thank you so much. I have loved this conversation. Thank you for showing up and being like letting us in to your world for a little bit.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. We'll see you next time on the Illicit Feminine. Have a great week.